Hi there. Thanks for joining me. I'm going to talk today about creating a wide path using the mindful eating cycle. I'm Dr. Michelle May, the founder and CEO of Am I Hungry Mindful Eating Programs and Training. But perhaps more important for this work is the fact that I struggled with yo-yo dieting for about 20 years. And I know many of the people that I've worked with over the last 20 years as I've healed my own relationship with food have had much of the same kinds of struggles. So today, I really want to dive in and talk a little bit more about how you can begin to heal your relationship with food. The problem is, of course, that when I talk about eating what you love or mindful eating, people often get into really fear-based thoughts about how this won't work for them. So for example, some people might say, "Oh, but if I try to eat whatever I want, I won't make healthy choices." Or they'll say, "Oh, I'd feel really guilty if I ate bad foods." Or, "Oh, I can't trust myself to do that. That would be a disaster." Or, "But how would I know when or what to eat?" Or most commonly, "Oh, I'd lose control of myself." And so, what I really want to share with you today is that I completely relate to all of those fears. For many, many years, I was doing it very differently than I am now. And I felt very much afraid of food and afraid of myself around food. But eventually, I figured out a way to manage my eating that was completely different. I've shared it in my books, Eat What You Love What You Eat, and in my training programs and in our mindful eating programs and many of my speeches. But today, I really want to talk to you about how this came into being, and more important, how you can use it to help you with your own eating patterns. So the cycle, the structure that I developed to help me teach other people how to do this is called the mindful eating cycle. Now, I know that many of you are already familiar with this cycle, so this will be a really short overview or a rehashing, if you will, of the mindful eating cycle. But if you're new to it, hopefully it will introduce you to the idea that you're not going to be flying by the seat of your pants, that you actually have some structure to help you with decision making. And once you learn how to use these 6 different decision points, eating becomes very natural. Eating and making decisions about eating becomes really almost effortless, like it was for my kids. So when you are using the mindful eating cycle path, it increases your awareness about why you're doing what you're doing. It helps you with decision making in any given situation, deciding whether to eat and what you were going to eat and how much to eat and all the things that we've used rules for when we're on a diet. We can begin to make those decisions for ourselves without rules at all. It also helps with problem solving. And in the next video, I've invited a member of our mindful eating support community to help me demonstrate how you can use the mindful eating cycle even when things haven't gone as well as you wanted them to. You don't have to go off the plan or off the program or off the diet, because there is no plan, program, or diet. All you're doing is making decisions. And so you can use the things that don't go well to help you learn and to get better and better as you practice. We also use it for planning. So, for example, let's say you have a challenging event coming up that you've struggled with in the past. You can walk through the mindful eating cycle and sort of imagine where the different places are that you could get tripped up and what you might do instead. And then last is for setting an intention for how you want to feel. And when we finish going through a brief overview of the mindful eating cycle, I'll share a little bit about my intention for eating and using this wide path for myself and how you might be able to adopt that for yourself as well. So I mentioned my children. This is Elise and Tyler. They're grown now, but when they were small, when I was still struggling with yo-yo dieting, I recognized that my kids totally manage their eating effortlessly. They weren't thinking all the time about when they should eat or what they should eat or how much they should eat. They pretty much ate when they were hungry, they stopped when they were full, they ate what they liked, and they didn't really obsess about it. They didn't feel guilty when they ate something that was on the bad list because there was no bad list. Now, eventually, I developed that mindful eating cycle and I called their pattern instinctive eating. Instinctive basically means natural or innate. And if you think about it, children often manage their eating just based on when they need fuel. So think about the why. The cycle driver for their whole cycle is fuel. So they eat when their body tells them they need fuel. So that's what hunger is all about, right? Your stomach growls, your blood sugar feels low. It tells you that your body needs to be topped up, right? They eat whatever they want, or whatever they choose, or in the case of my children, whatever I made available to them. And then they ate intentionally. And I don't mean that they ate mindfully and savored every bite. I just mean that they ate with the intention of meeting their fuel needs. And then they ate until they'd had enough, right? So that when they were done, when they'd satisfied their hunger, they would stop eating and then they would go out and use their energy to live their lives. They'd play, they'd go to school, they'd learn, they'd fight with each other. They used up their energy. And when the energy was all gone, they would get hungry again. Their body needed fuel and they'd go back through the cycle again. So it's very instinctive. Pretty much all of us were born with this instinctive ability to manage our eating this way. Unfortunately, I think a lot of us forget or unlearn this process, which is really what mindful eating and Am I Hungry programs are all about, is helping you relearn how to do this. Now, of course, my pattern was very different. I tended to overeat. I tended to feel like I was out of control with my eating. I'd do fine for a while and then I'd eat something bad or something I thought I shouldn't eat, or I'd feel overly stressed and then I would start to eat to feel better or distract myself. And so I often had a very different pattern than what I was observing with my children. So this is what I call the overeating cycle. In in the overeating cycle, why was I eating? Well, primarily due to triggers. And everybody has their own triggers. That's one of the beautiful things about the mindful eating cycle is I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just giving you some structure so you can explore what might be true for you. For me, my most common triggers were boredom and stress, which is kind of interesting, right? I was eating when I didn't have enough to do, and I was eating when I had too much to do, right? So when I was eating in response to triggers, then when did I feel like eating? Well, whenever something would show up that would throw me off kilter. Maybe I was overly tired. Maybe I was stressed out. Maybe everybody else was eating. Maybe I had just gone off a diet. And then, of course, what did I eat? Well, then I would eat foods that would bring me comfort or maybe make me feel better or happy or give me pleasure. And there's nothing wrong with enjoying the food that you eat. It's just that for me, food was really replacing some of the other things that I could have been doing to help bring a lot more pleasure into my own life at that point. I mean, I was a young mom and a doctor and had a really busy life. So it's understandable that we do these things. I'm not saying that there was something wrong with me, and there's nothing wrong with you either. It's just that we've learned how to use food to take care of our needs, which means our needs aren't being met very well, right? Now, how did I eat it? Well, typically mindlessly. I would eat while I was doing something else, maybe working on my charts in the office, or maybe, running errands or whatever. I just wasn't focused on the food that I was eating. I tended to eat fast because I didn't really give myself very much time to eat. And then sometimes I would eat secretly. I would eat when the kids were still at school or after my husband had gone to bed or in the break room when everybody else was busy. And so this pattern of eating mindlessly and fast and secretly didn't really lead to great satisfaction. Now, how much did I eat? Well, it depended on how much I had oftentimes. I would eat until the food was gone or the plate was clean or maybe somebody came home or maybe sometimes just when I felt so stuffed I had to stop. And then where did the energy go? Well, of course, my body would store any excess food I consumed that it didn't need. But more important, if I was eating because I was stressed out, I wasn't dealing with stress very well, was I? So I would still be stressed, and then the whole cycle would start all over again. So I don't know what your triggers are, but I my guess is that if they're driving your overeating cycle, but you keep trying to diet to fix it, you're really focusing on what you're eating when the problem might be why you're eating in the first place. So for me, when I would see this pattern and I didn't recognize what was really happening, I would put myself on a diet. Oh my gosh, I've got to get back in control again. I'm so out of control. And so I would start to follow all the rules perfectly. And actually, I felt kind of good at first, right? It's pretty exciting when you feel like, oh man, I finally got this handled, except that it was very difficult to sustain. Because when you look at the restrictive eating cycle, the rules tell you all about when you should eat, what you should eat, how you should eat it, how much you should eat. And of course, you're spending all of your energy focusing on diet and exercise, which doesn't leave a lot of energy left over to live the big life we crave, right? I mean, we think that we are wanting to eat healthier so that we can feel better and have more energy and enjoy our lives more. But we end up spending so much energy just trying to manage our food that there's not as much energy left over for the things that we really want. So for me, it began to really feel like I was on this tightrope where I had to do everything perfectly and, be really careful, follow all the rules. But the problem was one tiny misstep and I would fall right off and then start the whole process over again. For most people, especially many of the people that I've worked with over the last 20 years, that cycle of overeating, restrictive eating, we call it yo-yo dieting, is really a problem where we're eating, repenting for what we ate, and then repeating the whole process over again. It goes on and on and on. For me, I did that for 20 years thinking that, okay, this diet's going to work for me. I'll finally figure this out and this will be over. But it just never seemed to end. And so that's really when I switched my whole approach away from trying to be in control to being in charge. And I know that might sound like it's the same thing, but being in control is all about walking the tightrope. It's doing everything right, following all the rules. Whereas being in charge is simply being aware of everything that's happening, why I might feel like eating, what maybe is triggering me, am I even hungry? If I am, how hungry am I? And so on. And then with all the information available to me in the present moment, then making a decision about what I was going to do next. So mindful eating is very different from a tightrope. Mindful eating is a wide path that's very difficult to fall off, right? Because you can make a mistake, notice the consequences, and then do it differently the next time. You can make a choice, notice that it feels good. Maybe you make that choice again and again. But foods aren't good or bad. You're not having to follow any rules. You're not having to log everything that you eat. So you create this wide path for yourself. And the most beautiful thing about this wide path is it will last you for the rest of your life. In my case, I have been following this path now for as long as I used to be dieting. So for 20 years now, I have not only never, ever, ever been back on a diet, but I know for a fact I never will. And I hear this all the time from people that I work with, which is, I, I, I'll never diet again. It never has to be part of my experience again. So earlier, I talked to you about using the mindful eating to set an intention. And so I want to go back to that and share a little bit about my intention for my life with mindful eating, and also to suggest that maybe this is something you could consider for yourself, that maybe there is an option to starting keto or intermittent fasting or going back on Weight Watchers or going on some kind of a pill or any of these other options that might seem like maybe this one will work this time. You really have an opportunity here to create a path for yourself that will last for the rest of your life, not just for the next 2 or 3 months of the new year. So let's start with why, because everything does start with why, right? Why you're doing anything will drive every decision that follows. So my intention for why is I want to be in charge of my eating, my physical activity, and my self-care. Not about being in control, just about being in charge. I'm mindful of my physical and emotional needs, and I do my best to meet them appropriately. My best, not perfectly. I make mistakes, we all do, but at least I know that my intention is to take care of myself. I'm aware of what I'm experiencing in the present moment. That's what mindfulness is simply awareness of the present moment. So I can respond instead of reacting mindlessly or habitually. Once I become aware, I actually get to make choices. When do I eat? So, whenever I feel like eating, I get to make a decision. So, my intention is that when I feel like eating, I want to pause and check in and ask myself, am I hungry? In other words, does my body need fuel right now? I can use my hunger and fullness signals to help me decide when to eat, what to eat, and how much to eat. The other important thing about noticing that I feel like eating is that I also have the opportunity to notice when I'm not hungry, which might mean that I'm eating for some other reason. There's some other trigger going on. And when I'm aware of that, I get to make a different decision, or I have at least an opportunity to meet my real needs. So, to use the examples that I gave you before, for me, if I'm stressed and I notice that I feel like eating, what else could I do to make myself feel better or to relieve the stress? Do I need to make a to-do list? Do I need to ask for help? Do I need to take a break? What is it that I need to do to take care of myself? Now, what do I eat? This is something I love, especially during the holidays. Well, actually, all the time, because in our abundant food environment, we have lots and lots of opportunities to eat amazing food. And I don't want to be stuck having to figure out whether something's allowed or how much I'm going to have to exercise to pay penance for eating it. So, my intention for what I eat is I want to meet my needs for fuel, nourishment, and enjoyment. Enjoyment in eating is a legitimate reason for eating. When I'm hungry, I ask myself three questions. What do I want to eat? In other words, what would taste good? What do I need to eat? In other words, what does my body need, both from a health standpoint and an energy standpoint? And then last, what do I have? What are my options? What's available to me? Once I know what I want and what I need, then I go looking for something that will fit me. It's an inside out approach to eating. It's not, oh, let me open the refrigerator, see what's here, and then I'll eat whatever's there. Not that way. I choose from all foods freely using balance, variety, and moderation. In other words, no foods are bad, no foods are forbidden. I can eat whatever I want. And when guilt is no longer a factor, common sense prevails. So, in other words, it's a lot easier to practice balance, variety, and moderation if I don't feel guilty for choosing certain foods. I eat what I love without guilt, deprivation, or binging. In other words, I don't have to feel guilty when I choose something that used to be on the bad list. Now, I might feel regretful sometimes if I eat too much of a particular food, but regret leaves the door open for learning. I can learn from my mistakes and decide how to do it differently next time. And I'll show you that when I do that practice session with Luann from our mindful eating support community in our next video. I also have intentions about how I'm going to eat. In other words, I pause to become aware of what is happening in the present moment, noticing whether I'm feeling stressed or rushed or maybe deprived of pleasure in other areas of my life. I eat mindfully with intention and attention. Intention is purpose, attention is awareness. So having intention and attention allows me to meet my body's needs best. I pay attention to the effects of my choices to guide my future decisions without judgment. In other words, if I make a mistake, I don't judge myself or shame myself. I just use that information to help me say, oh, okay, well, I learned an interesting thing today. I nourish my body, mind, heart, and spirit through mindful eating and mindful living. In other words, as I learn how to eat more mindfully, I also begin to understand how to live my life more mindfully and intentionally as well. How much do I eat? Well, my intention is to feel better when I'm done eating than I did when I started. I want to feel good. I don't want to feel stuffed. And I certainly don't want to end a meal feeling deprived or still hungry, right? So my intention is to feel good when I'm done. So that means that if my intention is about feeling good, it doesn't need to be about being good. Being good is what diets teach us. That's an outside in approach. Follow the rules, eat this, not that, weigh, measure, count. No, that is not sustainable for the long term, at least for me, and probably not for you either. When I do eat too much, I turn the situation into a learning experience by noticing how I feel physically and emotionally without judging myself. In other words, don't miss the lesson. And last, but not only not least, but perhaps more important than any of the others is, where am I investing the energy that I've consumed? Because I think one of the things that's been forgotten is that we eat to fuel living. And so often our whole attention is on the eating and we forget the living part. So for me, my intention is to be physically active. I want to have stamina, strength, and flexibility to live my life fully, to do the things that I love. I become more aware of my own thoughts, my own feelings, and my actions. So I'm investing my energy in really noticing what I need. I build a self-care buffer zone, which basically means that I do things all throughout my day, throughout my weeks, to take care of myself so I don't have to use food to fill in the holes. I practice balance, variety, and moderation, not just in the way I eat, but also in the way I live. It's not one extreme or the other. And most important, I do what I love and I love what I do. In other words, it's no longer about following the diet perfectly. It's really about how can I enjoy this life that I've created for myself. So that is a really high level and very short overview of the mindful eating cycle. I want you to know that it takes time to learn how to use each of these decision points. And that's really what I'm here for, is to help be your guide, to help you gain more awareness and to learn some new strategies for managing your eating that doesn't require dieting or restricting ever again. In other words, I want to help you get on that wide path and stay there. So I hope this was helpful. And tomorrow I will help you see how you might use this mindful eating cycle when you do make a mistake, because we're still going to make mistakes. This is not about being perfect. It's just about continuing to live our lives fully. So I'll talk to you again really soon. Bye.